Amelia Davies had two lives. The first, and the one she lived every day, was Amy, the gentle-hearted kindergarten teacher at the Haven. A sprawling, sun-bleached orphanage nestled in the rolling hills of rural Idaho. The second was a ghost, a phantom of a person she had worked hard to bury. That person was known as Major A. Davies, a decorated operative of a clandestine special forces unit, an expert in asymmetrical warfare, close-quarters combat, and strategic extraction. For 5 years, Amy had been a perfect illusion. Her hands, once calloused from weapon training, were now soft from holding tiny, grubby hands. The sharp, military posture was replaced by a slight, comfortable stoop from bending down to tie shoelaces and comfort crying children. She had traded the cold steel of a combat knife for the dull plastic of safety scissors. The scars on her knuckles and the faint, star-shaped mark on her temple were her only remaining tell, a secret she hid beneath long-sleeved cardigans and a carefully cultivated persona of soft-spoken kindness. The children adored her. The other staff, a collection of dedicated but weary caretakers, saw her as a quiet blessing. She was the one who could calm the most difficult child with a whispered story, who organized the most creative art projects, and who seemed to have an endless supply of patience. Her life was a meticulously crafted lie, but it was a good one. It was a life of purpose, a way to atone for the brutal, necessary things she had done in her past. The laughter of 200 children was a far more potent bomb than any medal. The piece shattered on a Tuesday afternoon, the air typically thick with the scent of pine and fresh-cut grass, filled with the acrid smell of burnt rubber, as 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt in the gravel lot. Out of them spilled not the usual volunteers or delivery drivers, but a dozen men in tactical gear, their faces obscured by balaclavas. The leader, a man whose sheer bulk was intimidating even from a distance, carried a rifle with the casual ease of a man accustomed to violence. He was a predator, and he had just stepped into the henhouse. Everybody down. Now, the leader bellowed, his voice amplified by the quiet afternoon. A wave of terrified gasps rippled through the playground. Children froze, their colorful plastic toys forgotten. The other teachers, caught completely off guard, herded the kids together, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. Amy's instincts, honed by a decade of combat, screamed to life. The soft mask of her teacher persona fell away in an instant, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. Her eyes, which had been warm and kind moments before, narrowed as she scanned the scene. Her mind processed the situation with military speed. 3 vehicles, 12 armed men, all with a clear purpose. Their gear was professional, their movements coordinated. This wasn't a random robbery. They were looking for something, or someone. And they had chosen the Haven, with its remote location and vulnerable population, as the ideal hunting ground. One of the men grabbed the orphanage director, Mr. Henderson, a kind elderly man, and threw him to the ground. "Where is it?" the man snarled, pressing a boot into Henderson's back. "Where is what?" Henderson stammered, his face pale with shock. "There's nothing here. We're an orphanage." "Don't play games with me," the leader said, his voice a low growl. "We know what you're hiding. Give us the files, or we start having a fire sale on these little angels." He gestured with his rifle at the huddle of terrified children. The threat was clear, cold, and absolute. This was the line. The moment when Amy's carefully constructed world of safety and innocence had been breached by the very darkness she had been running from. She looked at the faces of her children, little Leo, who struggled with reading but had the heart of a poet, sweet Maya, who drew pictures of flowers all day, and Daniel, the quiet boy who trusted her more than anyone else in the world. Their small faces were etched with pure terror. The teacher's voice, her gentle "Now, children, let's all be calm," was no longer an option. The time for pretending was over. "I'm the one you want," Amy said, her voice surprisingly steady. She stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The movement was fluid, controlled, and drew the attention of every man. The leader looked at her, a smirk playing on his lips. He saw a small, unassuming woman in a floral dress and sensible shoes. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm the head of the school," she said. "Whatever files you're talking about, I can get them for you. Just let the children go." The leader laughed, a short, humorless sound. "What makes you think you're in a position to negotiate?" Amy's gaze didn't waver. "Because I know this place better than anyone. I know every nook and cranny, every hidden passage. I know the quickest way to get out and the quickest way to get in." It was a bluff, but it was delivered with the ironclad confidence of a seasoned interrogator. The leader paused, his smirk fading. He saw something in her eyes, now not fear, but a flinty resolve he recognized. "Get her," he ordered one of his men, a younger, overeager mercenary. "Bring her to me." The man moved toward her, his rifle barrel pointed at her chest. This was the moment. The opening she needed. Her eyes flickered to the man's feet, his stance, the angle of his weapon. In a blur of motion too fast for the eye to follow, she ducked, pivoted on the ball of her foot, and lashed out with a perfectly aimed kick to his knee. The bone-jarring crack echoed through the sudden silence. The man crumpled, his rifle clattering to the ground. Before anyone could react, Amy had scooped up the weapon, a military-grade assault rifle, and had it leveled at the leader. The playground fell silent. The children, wide-eyed, watched in stunned silence. The other teachers stared, mouths agape. This wasn't Amy, the teacher. This was someone else entirely. "The files are not here," she said, her voice now hard as granite. "But I'll give you a choice. Leave now, and you might get to go home to your miserable lives. Or stay, and I will personally dismantle every single one of you." The leader's face contorted with rage. "You're a dead woman, lady," he snarled, raising his own weapon. A shot rang out, not from his gun, but from a nearby window. The leader's rifle was blasted from his hands, the stock splintered. He looked up, confused, then down at his singed hand, then back to the window. Another shot, this one taking out the tire of one of the SUVs. Amy had not fired. She hadn't even moved. She had simply picked up the weapon from the fallen man and was holding it, but the shots had come from somewhere else entirely. In her time here, she had spent countless hours teaching the children about gardening and nature. But she had also spent late nights meticulously scouting and securing the property, setting up a series of tripwires and booby traps, each designed to be non-lethal, but highly effective. She had done it out of paranoia, a lingering habit from her old life, never truly believing she would need them. Now, her secret plan was coming to fruition. "I told you I know this place," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the remaining men, looking for a weakness in their formation. "You're in my house." The other men, shocked and confused, tried to regroup. Amy didn't give them a moment. She dropped the rifle, knowing that using it would only put the children in more danger. She was better with her hands anyway. With a swift movement, she was behind the nearest man, her arm wrapped around his neck, her other hand a pressure point to his temple. He went limp, and she let him fall. She moved like a ghost, a blur of motion and controlled violence. Each movement was an economy of force, a lesson learned from 100 combat scenarios. She was no longer just fighting. She was creating chaos, using her knowledge of their psychology to sow doubt and fear. The hunters had become the hunted. A second man charged her, his weapon aimed wildly. She sidestepped his clumsy attack, using his momentum against him. Her fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack, and he dropped. 2 more men tried to corner her, but she was already gone, having slipped into the main building through an open door. A small group of children scurrying after her. Inside, she locked the door behind her, her breathing heavy but controlled. She looked at the 4 little faces staring up at her. It was Leo, Maya, Daniel, and a little girl named Chloe. They had seen her fight, seen her in a way they never should have. "Listen to me," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "We are going to play a game. It's called hide and stay quiet. Can you do that for me? Can you be as quiet as little mice?" The children, too terrified to speak, nodded. "Good. Now, you're going to be my little team. Maya, you know where the emergency supply closet is, right?" Maya nodded, her eyes wide. "Good. You're going to get everyone else there. I want you to go through the back hallways, not the main corridor. Tell everyone to stay there, to not make a sound, no matter what they hear." She gave them precise instructions, her words a blend of military command and gentle encouragement. She wasn't just a teacher anymore. She was a squad leader, and her team was for terrified children. The children, perhaps sensing the gravity of the situation, listened and obeyed without question. They trusted her, and that was all that mattered. As the children disappeared down a hallway, Amy turned her attention back to the crisis. She had to secure all 200 children and the staff. The building was old, a maze of hallways and rooms, a perfect place for a tactical advantage. She knew she couldn't take on the remaining men head-on, not with their superior firepower, but she could use the building, her training, and their arrogance against them. She was a sniper, a saboteur, a ghost in the machine, and now, this old orphanage was her playground. She moved silently through the deserted halls, the soft padding of her sensible shoes a stark contrast to the heavy boots of the men outside. She found a broom closet and took out an old fire extinguisher. It was heavy, and she knew the pressurized canister could be used as a diversion or even a makeshift weapon. She moved on, her mind already calculating angles, escape routes, and weak points in the mercenaries' strategy. She found a group of children huddled in the kitchen, a terrified cafeteria worker trying to console them. "Everyone to the basement," Amy said, her voice a low command. "Now, don't make a sound. The door is over there. Once you're in, lock it from the inside and don't open it for anyone." The worker, seeing the transformation in Amy's eyes, didn't question her. She simply obeyed. Amy knew what the leader was after. The haven was built on land that had once belonged to a reclusive tech billionaire. Rumors of hidden data caches and encrypted files were common lore in some circles. Amy had dismissed them as urban legends, but now, with this display of force, she knew there was truth to them. The children were collateral, a means to an end, but they were her children. She made her way to the boiler room in the basement, where she had stashed a small, waterproof pouch. Inside were her last remaining tools from her old life: a multi-tool, a small lock-picking kit, and a satellite phone, a piece of technology she had sworn to never use again. She had kept it as a morbid souvenir, a reminder of the life she had left behind. Now, it was her only hope. She quickly unlocked the phone and sent a pre-programmed distress signal to her old unit. A coded message that would be received by a single high-level contact. It simply said, "Haven, 200 plus. Hostiles, need exfil." She didn't know if the contact was still in the loop, or if they would even respond, but it was her only card left to play. Then, she began to set up her defenses. She used the fire extinguisher to create a thick cloud of white dust in a long hallway, a blinding smoke screen. She tied thin wires to door handles and filled buckets of water to create a noisy cascade if someone tripped the wire. She was creating a symphony of chaos, designed to confuse, disorient, and delay her opponents. She wasn't trying to kill them. She was trying to buy time until help arrived. She could hear them now, their heavy boots thudding through the halls as they searched. The leader was getting frustrated, his commands echoing through the building. They were spread out now, a mistake Amy had been counting on. They were no longer a cohesive unit, but a collection of individuals, each one a target. She found a high vantage point, a disused attic space with a small window overlooking the main hallway. From there, she could see and hear everything. The leader and his second-in-command were in the main hall, shouting orders, their patience wearing thin. "Find her, she can't have gone far," the leader roared. His second-in-command, a wiry man with a cruel smirk, looked at him with an expression of concern. "Boss, this is a mess. It feels like we're walking into a trap." The leader scoffed. "A trap set by a kindergarten teacher. Get your head straight. She got lucky. Now find her." That was their mistake. Their overconfidence was her greatest weapon. She waited until the leader had his back to her, and then she dropped her first surprise. A small bag filled with nails and ball bearings, landing with a loud clatter just a few feet behind him. The men jumped, their rifles raised. Amy, using the distraction, slipped out of the attic, moving to her next position. The game had begun. She used the building as her partner. She triggered a tripwire, sending a bookshelf crashing down in a hallway, cutting off two men. She used her knowledge of the wiring to short out the lights in another section, plunging it into darkness. She was a ghost, a whisper, a force of nature that they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't stop. The men started to panic, their coordination breaking down. They were no longer the hunters. They were the terrified prey. The leader, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, made a tactical decision. He started to burn the children's artwork. "If you don't come out, we'll start a fire," he threatened, holding up a box of matches. "And then we'll see how fast you run." This was the final escalation, the direct threat to the children, the line she would not cross. Amy dropped down from the ceiling rafters, landing with a soft thud behind the leader. He turned, his eyes wide with shock. Her face was grim, her eyes alight with a cold, terrifying fury. She was no longer a teacher, no longer a ghost. She was a weapon of righteous vengeance. "You don't touch them," she said, her voice so low it was almost a growl. The leader, a man who had faced down hardened soldiers, felt a tremor of fear. This was not the woman he had laughed at. This was a monster in a dress. He raised his weapon, but it was too late. Amy moved with a speed and precision he could only dream of. A blur of motion, a twist of his arm, and the rifle was out of his hands, clattering to the floor. She used his own momentum against him, and he found himself on his back, her knee on his chest, her fist inches from his face. She held him there, a man twice her size, his every attempt to struggle futile. "Tell me what you're here for," she said, her voice hard. He just stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief and pain. "Tell me now, or I will break every bone in your miserable body." He broke. He confessed that they were hired to retrieve encrypted files that were supposedly hidden in the orphanage's old server room. The files contained evidence of their employer's criminal activities, a powerful politician who wanted to bury his past. They were told the orphanage was a simple, easy target. Just as the words left his mouth, the sound of sirens filled the air, a distant welcome wail that grew louder with every passing second. Amy looked up, a glimmer of relief in her eyes. Help had arrived. Her Hail Mary call had been answered. She held the leader until the local sheriff and a team of specialized federal agents, her old unit, burst through the door. They surveyed the scene, a dozen men, all neutralized, some unconscious, some just bewildered. The leader was still pinned beneath her, his face a picture of terror. Amy rose, her eyes meeting those of her former commander, a woman named Colonel Harper. There was a moment of silent understanding, a brief flicker of recognition and respect. "Major Davies," Harper said, her voice a low tone. "You really are a magnet for trouble." Amy, suddenly feeling the weight of her old life settle back upon her shoulders, just managed a weak smile. "They threatened the kids, Colonel." Harper nodded. "I saw your signal. Thank God you kept the phone. Looks like you were just in time." The files they were after were on an old, forgotten server in the basement. "They're secure now." The children, seeing the men being taken away, started to peek out of their hiding spots. They ran to Amy, not with fear, but with a mixture of awe and love. Little Maya hugged her legs, and Leo tugged at her dress. "You saved us, Miss Amy," he said, his small voice full of admiration. Amy knelt down, the hard-edged soldier persona softening as she looked into their faces. "We did it together," she said, the gentle teacher's voice returning. "We played the hide-and-stay-quiet game, remember? You all were very brave." The other teachers and staff, having watched the whole thing unfold from a distance, looked at her with a mixture of shock and profound gratitude. They knew now that Amy was more than just a teacher. Later that evening, after the children had been calmed and put to bed, she sat with Mr. Henderson and Colonel Harper. The director, his face still pale, couldn't stop staring at her. "Amy, who are you?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. She sighed, the exhaustion of the day finally setting in. "My name is Amelia Davies," she said quietly, "and I used to be a soldier. I came here to find peace, to live a different life." Colonel Harper nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "We've been looking for you, Amelia. There are things we could use you for. A desk job, a training position. You're too valuable to stay in the shadows." Amy looked at the window, at the dark, silent playground where she had once taught children to draw with sidewalk chalk. The innocence of the place had been stained by violence, and her secret was out. She knew she couldn't stay. The haven was no longer a safe haven for her, and she was no longer just Amy, the teacher. Her two lives had collided, and the explosion had left her exposed. "Thank you, Colonel," she said, her voice heavy with a sense of finality. "But my time here is over. I need to find a new place to be, a new place to hide." She said goodbye to the children the next morning, a brief, tearful farewell. She hugged each one, her heart aching with the bittersweet knowledge that she had protected them, but now had to leave them. She got into a car with Colonel Harper, driving away from the orphanage and the life she had built. As the car rolled down the dusty road, she looked back at the haven one last time, a tear rolling down her cheek. She was no longer a soldier or a teacher. She was something in between, a protector who had found her purpose in the most unexpected of places. She had pretended to be a teacher, and in doing so, had become a better soldier, a better person. But she had been forced to reveal her true self, and in the end, it had cost her the one place she had ever truly felt at home. She drove into the horizon, a new, uncertain chapter beginning, a ghost once again. But this time, with the memory of 200 children who would forever remember her as the woman who had saved them.